Hey folks, welcome to the Reason RX podcast with Michael and
Melanie.
Hope y'all are doing well. So today we're going to be talking to Joe Camp. Talked to him recently about Benji. Today we'll be continuing the discussion and talking about more of his work with animals and his work with horses and how he got into it in the book The Soul of a Horse. You know, it's important for not only the biological aspect and thinking about animals and what they're like, but, you know, the relationship. And then as The Soul of a Horse is subtitled, you know, life lessons. There's surprisingly a lot more, you know, maybe for some people, surprisingly, a lot more you can get out of this than just horses. Even though, well, we might be talking about horses, but we're talking about a whole heck of a lot more because as we'll explore and as you'll learn, you got to have confidence and be like some of these things people talk about and maybe some martial arts or meditation or yoga and stuff. You got to be centered and balanced and emotionally stable and all that to really deal with the horse well. So it helps you as well. There's all kinds of things you get out of being around a horse, and that's why they can be used for therapy. I think they're used for some autistic kids, as I might have mentioned before in last podcast with Joe, but certainly in others, they're used with some soldiers with PTSD to help them recover. It is for a reason, you know. Dogs, horses can help us heal and become better human beings in ways that we can't with other people. You know, we need the other people, but there are certain things we can focus on with dogs and horses we can't with people. And so they're very effective in helping us deal with things like that. But as we say, there's a whole, like, hearing his story and reading the book, you know, as we talked about Melanie and I and our kids in our previous podcast about The Soul of a Horse, there's a lot you get out of this that's relevant to human life. Living a human life, whether or not you are around horses and are scared of them and will ever be around them, being a parent, being a teacher, having any kind of like leadership role at all or any relationship with the people, you will learn from this book and you will learn from horses. So this is very important stuff. You know, we got to think we're not brains in a vat. We're not like intellects divorced from everything else. You know, we're like human beings. We got this full, whole, developed, holistic, but like nature to us that we got to consider. And so, and this is helping us deal with that. So this will be a really valuable conversation. Might be surprised that there's a lot we can get out of this and learn from it. You have anything to add, Melanie?
Just that I guess everybody probably knows by now that I homeschool the kids, but Michael had us read Joe Camp's book, The Soul of a Horse, for a class, really, and in science, understanding the nature of different animals and the horse in particular here. But all of the kids, ranging in age 11 to 16, have said they will never look at horses the same way again. And this book has made a huge impact on our family because we see horses around because we're in Minnesota and North Dakota, and it just has completely changed our views. So I cannot wait to talk to Joe about all of the very valuable information that he has put into this book today. So thanks and welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Again, it hasn't been that long, so I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, it's been recent. Let me see if I can find something really quickly. Darn. Well, I was going to try to find this. In one, I bought a copy of The Soul of a Horse to give a student, and in the beginning there was a inscription by a father to his daughter that was really, really touching and well done. But I thought I had it on my blog, but I guess I don't. But I'll put a.
Yeah, you told me about it, and I think you read it to me last time we were together.
Oh, huh.
I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was very sweet.
But yeah, I'll like try to find that and put a link to that or something so folks can see that and some other information about the book. So I won't take any more time trying to search for it. I was trying to search for it. It's not on my blog. I'm looking at my email. But anyway, so let's get started. And Melanie, what? Melanie, did you say something?
No, nothing.
Okay. All right. So to kind of review a little bit, step back a little bit for maybe some folks that are new to this. So maybe Joe, could you, like you talked about your background before, could, like for folks just tuning in, could you give like a brief description of your background?
Yeah, as I recall, it took hours to do that.
Yeah. So listen to the other podcast, folks.
Yeah, listen to the other one for. My first real job was writing and directing all the Benji movies, and I created a character and wound up having to distribute the movies because they were all turned down by Hollywood, including the first one, which wound up because of some various things that God has done over the years, being the number 3 movie of the year, even though Hollywood did not distribute it or have anything to do with it.
Wow.
And so in the next incarnation is when we got our first horses, and that came in kind of a weird way because we'd moved to a new home down in a place called Valley Center, California. It's North County, San Diego County, and this was a house that was up on a hill, and it's kind of like a pyramid almost. The hill was. I mean, it was really steep, but down a ways from the house there were some horse stalls, and we'd sit out on the front porch in the evening and chat about things and look down across those stalls. And one of us would say, "Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if there were a couple of horses down in those stalls?" Because we were looking west, and on a clear day, across the top of the mountain, you could actually see the sun drop into the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
And so, if there were, it was like a picture postcard, and there were a couple of horses in those stalls down there, it would make everything better. And we talked about maybe going off on a trail ride sometime and just kind of checking them out. I've been around horses, not a lot, but enough to call myself a fan and to really love horses. We did one movie that had a lot of horses in it, and I actually directed some of the movie from the back of this really, really spectacular horse.
Cool.
So anyway, we talked about a trail ride. So one day, which just happened to be my birthday, she came in and dragged me out of bed and said, "Get your clothes on, we're leaving the house." And I said, "Well, where are we going?" And she said, "You'll find out." And so my antennas were actually up because it was my birthday and there was something going on. So we go down the hill into Escondido, and there's a big park there that used to be a ranch, and it goes up a mountain and all around this mountain, and they donated it to the county or the city or something, and they have trails all over this particular mountain, and there are no motorized. You can take a bike on it, you can hike on it, you can jog on it, you can take horses on it. And so we pull into. The first thing we went by was a rescue, a small animal rescue. And I said, "Oh wait, what's going on? We got 4 dogs. We got enough dogs." She just kept right on driving past that. She turned into the park, and there was a horse trailer there with 3 horses already saddled, and that was a lady that had got 2 very nice horses and was going to lead us on this trail ride. And we went out and we were gone for about 6 hours. And literally 2 weeks later, we owned 3 horses.
No.
Huh. Wow.
And I can promise anybody who's listening that having a couple of empty stalls on your property and a 6-hour trail ride are not good reasons to go out and buy 3 horses. we should have named them, accordingly, like obsessive and that sort of thing, because it wasn't very smart, and we didn't approach it in the right direction, anything. But very fortunately, Cash was one of the 3. And when we first saw him face to face, I was done in about 30 seconds. I mean, our eyes met, and it was clear that, later, of course, we find out, just how prescient these animals are, and what he was projecting to me was every bit of what I was projecting back to him. So that's how we got into it, and got into horses altogether. And before we actually picked him up, we had made our token trip to Boot Barn, where you gather all the goodies that one needs when horses are going to be present, or at least some of them. And we didn't, had no clue basically what we were doing. We were just getting things we were supposed to get, somebody told us to get, or whatever.
Yeah.
And Kathleen happened to pick up I think it was a horse trader, one of those newspapers that lists all the horses. You put classified ads in there when your horse is for sale, kind of thing. And there was an article in there about this guy named Monty Roberts, who everybody who's been around horses, I'm sure, knows of, and knows well of. And
Or at least they should.
He's a very, very well-known clinician who has a very strong belief in nonviolent methods of working with and training horses and so forth. And he has a procedure for getting to know a horse in the very beginning. Horses, I've seen him take horses that are, never been touched, basically, much less ridden, and in 30 minutes have them following him around the round pen that they're in, and putting a rider on them, and
wow.
everything, just going beautifully, and doing all that in literally 30, 40 minutes. And it's all found in it. Luckily, she read that while we had her 2 kids with us, and we had stopped at In-N-Out. She's never been to California. That is the singular. That's the one hamburger that I would eat today. I never eat hamburgers today, but I would, if I had access to one of those, I would. Boy, they're good. Anyway, we're sitting there eating those things, and she's reading this article, and she pitches it over to me when she's through. And so I go home and order his DVDs, his book.
Cool.
The Man Who Listens to Horses, which is sold, I don't know, well over 1 million copies. It was the #1 New York Times bestseller. The Queen of England is a big
that
good book, and of him and so forth. But anyway, so I had all that under my belt, and watched his DVD for Join Up, and learned. And I didn't know really what it meant in the beginning, I'm sure.
Yeah, takes a while.
But I learned that the trust, and he goes through this process, and at the very end of it, he turns his back and waits, and he's giving the horse the opportunity of the horse's free will to say, okay, I trust you to be my leader.
Mm.
And that had come to mean so much more to me than even then. But when I did that, that's the first thing I did when Cash hit the ground at our place, is take him down to the round pen and do the join up procedure, and turn my back on him and waited seemingly like for days. but eventually I felt his breath on my neck, and he blew in my ear and kind of laid his chin on my shoulder and said, I trust you. I trust you to be my leader. And I just broke down in tears. I was
I imagine.
Actually. I'm glad there was nobody around. But I promised him that day, after that happened, that I would provide for him the best life that I possibly could. And the trouble with that was that I had no idea what that life was.
Oh, yeah, true. A lot of people don't, unfortunately.
So that's kind of the route, that's kind of what started us off, is that all of a sudden I cared deeply for this horse, and I was going to do it right. And it wasn't just a matter of having a horse to go off and do eventing and win blue ribbons and that. It was, I think that for a long time I looked for how do you describe this relationship? It's not partners, because you are the leader, but you're leading as you would one of your kids or something, with love and direction and so forth. And finally, we were watching Hidalgo, the movie Hidalgo. Have you seen that?
Yeah, long time.
It's a really good movie, but the very opening scene of the movie nails it for me, because they're on this race or whatever they're doing, and they're sleeping at night, and the star's getting up, putting everything back together, and he looks around and calls for his horse. And the horse whinnies a little bit. He's down at the lake getting a drink. He's at liberty. He has no halter or anything on. And he said, "Come on, little brother, it's time to go." And I said, "That's it. Stop the tape. Wait a minute." Kathleen and I talked about it for some time. I said, we looked forever for the words that would describe the kind of relationship that I now felt with that horse, and that's what it was. It's he was effectually my little brother, and that means I will lead him and guide him, but I will do it all with love and so forth. And I can't tell you how much trust, the concept of trust and letting the horse choose you, and choose to trust you. I have come to believe now that that's the whole enchilada right there, because everything changes just overwhelmingly for the better once that has happened.
Yeah, that's important.
The horse has chosen you.
Yeah.
And I've learned over the years that there's a lot of ways to do it. Monty Roberts' join up is one, and he's very successful with it. But any way that you can devise that will allow the horse to make the choice. And we have a thing, we've developed a thing we call no agenda times. Basically because I'm lazy, and we have a couple of Mustangs that we've adopted from the BLM, fresh out of the wild, and we had one of them that was pregnant, and both of them were pregnant actually, but the last one that we adopted was pregnant. We had already made our move to Tennessee from California. We're in Middle Tennessee now. We're about an hour south of Nashville, and that's a whole other conversation because it's taking our horses off a high desert where there's no such thing as grass, bringing them to Middle Tennessee where it rains, every 3 days a week. And it's, they're constantly, and when they went out in the pasture the first time, you can kind of see their mouths drop open. Oh my gosh! Can you look at the grass?
Yeah.
They were really good to go, but we developed this no agenda time. I mean, there's not really any development to it. But Kathleen, who has been a lawyer for 25 years, is now teaching at a prep school here in Bell Buckle, Tennessee, believe it or not, called the Web School. And she teaches AP classes and junior American literature. And by the end of the year, I know everything there is to know about her class, and what they are and what they're doing and who does what, the whole thing. Because we go down in the evening when she gets home and we feed, and then we sit with one of our horses. At that time, it was Sappy, who had come to us and was supposed to have a baby 3 months after she got here, and she had it 3 days after she got here. And she was untouchable when she had the baby.
Mm.
And I could sit on a hay bale and be 3 feet away from her while she was eating, and that was fine. But if I reached out to touch her, she was gone. If I stood up, she was gone. I had to be sitting down. But when her baby was born, she did not object. I made no moves to go to the baby and start trying to imprint or whatever the baby. I waited till the baby came to me, which she did on her very first day.
Huh.
And
cool.
Wandered over to me and started smelling my hand and licking my hand, and I ultimately started rubbing on her and rubbing her face and her legs and her back and so forth. And I had the baby in my lap on the second or third day of my life,
nice.
snoring.
Wow.
And but I could not touch Saffron. And so what no agenda time is being there, available. Basically, it's just like the end of Bonnie Roberts' Join Up. You're there and you're available, and it's up to the horse to make the decision. And the difference is that it takes a lot longer when you don't go through all the procedures and so forth. And so we would sit down in no agenda time and ignore her completely. And if she came up and wanted, you could tell that she was kind of exploring a little bit. She wanted a nose sniff or something like that. I would sniff with her and just look at her and make no attempt to touch her. I had to sit on my hands because I really wanted to try. And but I knew that that wasn't her end result. She was just exploring. And so we would go on and we'd talk. And so that went on for, at the end, it had gone on for 35 days. But about a week before that 35th day, the baby was asleep on Kathleen's feet, actually laying on Kathleen's feet. And we were sitting there talking, and Mama was nearby, munching some hay, and she looked over at the water tub, which was, 40 yards away across the paddock. And she looked down at the baby, she looked at us, looked back at the water trough, and walked off to get some water. That's the first time she'd ever done that.
Wow.
And I said,
nice.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Things are going on. We're not too far away.
Yeah, cool.
And to leave that baby in our care, sleeping on Kathleen's feet, these strange human beings. But, the substance of no agenda time is to give the horse no reason whatsoever, any reason, to not trust you. So that trust has to be the ultimate end to the whole thing. And I've seen, like with Zeke, it began to take place over time, and with a lot of that, you can see that it's coming. But I've never had anything happen like with Safi. About a week after the event where she walked over for the water, we were sitting down there talking, and our paddocks and barn, breezeway, and around the water, pond, and all of that is all pea gravel, because all the horses are barefoot. We'll come back to
cool.
to all of that and the whys, but it's really, really good for their feet because they don't wear shoes, none of them. And so anyway, I hear crunching on the pea gravel, and I'm turned towards Kathleen. She's looking kind of over my shoulder, and I said, "Is she getting closer?" And she said, "Uh-huh." And she's pulling out her phone and slipping, punching in the camera. And about that time, she got close enough, and she blew in my ear, dropped her head on my shoulder,
wow,
and went to sleep.
Wow.
And I was like, the boy kid in the theater on his first date. As if the girl doesn't know that hand's slipping around behind her. But I was easing it up over the backside of her neck, and being very careful, because I tried a couple of times before we got into this no agenda time thing to touch her, and I couldn't. I mean, she was gone, and she wouldn't allow it. And so I ease it up over her neck, and I begin to rub, and there's no reaction whatsoever.
Nice.
So I scratch behind her ears, scratch her in her ears, scratch her under her chin, down on her chest, up on her back. I stand up, go all the way down her back, scratch her on the belly, and she just stands there.
Yeah, that's the kind of trust a lot of people want with horses, but not enough get. It's like, yeah.
And I went down to her feet, and I didn't pick anything up that night, because I didn't want to push it. I didn't want to blow it, and I didn't want it to end other than the way I felt right then. So I didn't go all the way with it, but it was. I mean, she flipped a switch, and I've never had it happen before or since, really. And that it just happened just like that. And a couple of nights later, Kathleen went over, and we'd had a halter hanging on the paddock, one of the posts of the paddock or something, just so that she can get familiar for it being there and whatnot. And Kathleen went over and picked it up and brought it back and had her sniff it and rubbed it on her face, and blah, 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 went all the way through the, rubbing it down her back and getting her totally comfortable with the halter, and put the halter on and take it off, put it on, take it off, and then finally tied it. Non-event. Absolutely a non-event.
Yeah, as opposed to, like, for a lot of people, they got to struggle for that.
And I, the next morning, I clipped on I put the halter on and clipped on a lead rope, and had a little incident, my mistake, right at the beginning, but we brought it all back, and Kathleen was taking pictures, and they're all on the website under Sassy and Stormy, and it literally in 10 or 15 minutes, I had her leading on a loose line,
wow,
turning, doing, backing up, any of that stuff. And so out in the middle of the paddock, I took the halter off and looped the rope around my hand, and I said, "I'm going to go put this up." And when I turned to go put it up, she turned and walked right beside me all the way in. And I said, "What do we need this thing for?" And my guess is, and that was, Safi is, Stormy is 6 and a half now. Yeah,
Mm.
like that. And so that was 6.5 years ago in that vicinity. And I'll bet she hasn't had a halter on 6 times.
Wow. Nice.
In all 6 of those years. And she will follow me anywhere I want. All the horses will do that. Follow me anywhere I want to go, and etc. And we train. We have totally gone to training, and I see now that it's getting a whole lot more talk and exposure and so forth.
Good.
Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is where you, for example, want the horse to lower its head, and you pull, not heavily, but you pull it and make it uncomfortable for them unless they lower their head. And when they lower their head, you release it and say, oh, what a good boy, you got a reward. And the reward was the release of the pressure that you were going through.
Mm-hmm.
And I never much cared for that.
At least it's better than
But
beating the horse, as some people do.
That's what everybody was doing, and that's the way it was supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know the horse that wakes up in the morning saying, well, somebody please apply pressure to me so that when you release it, I have a reward.
Yeah.
And so we train with positive reinforcement always, understanding. We start with trust. We start with trust every time. And once the trust is gotten, we move along from there. And the first 2 things that I teach a horse is how to back up. That's number 1, if they don't already know how. And if they know how, I teach them how to back up the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the herd, in the wild, it's who moves who. You know, horses, unlike people who have a leader and a group, horses, each one has a leader and somebody that they're, a subdominant, somebody that they're over, and except the top one and the bottom one, and they all have a place on the chain, on the ladder, and it changes from time to time, but and there's always, a horse. I mean, like right now, we have 7. And poor Zeke, because he's obviously not a female, and the other 6 are. And he's at the bottom of the heap. He's on the bottom rung on the ladder. And I've often wondered, holy moly, what would it be like to have 7 women, any one of who can make you move, make you let them eat first, drink first, whatever. And
different
so,
species, yeah. It's like that's
but
their
who
life.
moves who in the herd is how the leadership placement is determined. And so when a horse will back up willingly for you, which is not a gait that they particularly love, backing up. And so if any one of them ever gives me any reason to believe that they are trying me out as if I were a horse, and to see who's going to be on top, I back them halfway to Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
They say, "Oh yeah, okay, I got it. I remember now. You moved me. Okay, I'm good." And that's one of the things that I teach before I teach anything else. And I don't do it the way anybody else does it either. And it's pretty gross ways of teaching that out in the clinician spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But the second thing that I do is I teach them to smile. And a smile from a horse, for those who don't know horses, is just a parting of the lips, showing the teeth, big, wide, open mouth, like they were about to plant the world's largest kiss on you. and the reason I do that is it's very easy to teach, and it begins the concept, because when they do it and they do it right, they get a treat. And my concept, I mean, that's part of what I'm calling the positive reinforcement way of teaching, because if you do something I like, I do something you like. I don't put a bunch of pressure on you and then release it so that you like that and call that a reward. I teach you to do something and you do it, and I give you a treat for doing it. And that has now become, I don't know how many of you know or have ever heard of Mustang Maddie, but she is one of those who is just an amazing person. She spends all day, every day, with her horses.
Cool.
And all of them are Mustangs that aren't zebras and donkeys. She has, I think, 2 zebras and has worked with them. But she uses the same thing. She uses treats and positive reinforcement. And the reason I started doing it in the first place is because once a horse has said, "I trust you," they will do anything in the world you would like for them to do if you've got the sense enough to explain it to them in a way that makes them understand what you want them to do.
That's what a lot of people want, but yeah, they don't go about it right and never end up getting it and end up being scared of their horse and stuff. So yeah, if a lot of people would use these methods and do the thing that some people say, they say go faster by going slower.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing. It's like you go real slow at first and then bam, all these benefits that all these people want, but because they're trying to force themselves on the horse or whatever, or expect the horse to be like a lawnmower, because they do stuff like that, they never get
motorcycle.
It. Yeah.
Motorcycle is my that's the analysis I use all the time. And I'm actually, much to Kathleen's chagrin, I said that a couple of times. I said, what you need is a motorcycle.
True, yeah.
But
it's true. Some people.
It is, So what I want them to do is get the concept that I'm going to be showing them stuff and teaching them stuff, and when they do it, they're going to get something they like. And I think that's a fair way to approach it. You do something I like, I'll do something you like. And so it goes from there with, little trick kind of things and so forth, but then I get out and I use it on everything. That's why any one of them will follow me 300 yards from one end to the other of 3 football fields.
Life is more about achieving values than like avoiding pain, and I think that's a good thing you're doing. I like that a lot. Like with people, dogs, we got to defend ourselves and avoid pain. Yeah, but the most important thing is achieving values and showing you're a good leader. It's like you're leading these horses and they know you're going to do it, and there's these rewards, and they're not like scared of you or something. It's like because they want it.
And once they have assured themselves that they trust you, then that makes a lot of life so much easier, because they know that you're not going to take them into something that is going to be really scary.
Yeah.
And instead of not going, they'll go. They may be apprehensive, but they're not. They know that they're in good hands. And
right.
That you're not going to do something crazy. And they also know the minute they do it right that they've got it, that they have a handle on it, because you give them a treat for it. They say, yes, now I know, I got it. And, for example, it's, one of the things we have always taught all of our horses is to flex with the lightest of any kind of encouragement. And if you're riding, you got reins on the horse. We don't ride with bits, by the way.
Good.
We only ride bitless, and generally we don't even use a bitless bridle. We just put on a little rope halter and loop rein, and there we go. And we try not to use the reins any more than necessary, because the horse really should get all of its messages from your legs, and your butt, your body movement, and what you're doing, because that's plenty of communication for them. And but we teach them to flex, whether it's under rein or at liberty, because if anything does happen when you're out riding, and just the lightest touch of that rein will get them to swing their head around, that's going to cause them to go into a circle, and they're not going to race off and run off and accidentally buck you off or anything like that. And you slow the circle down, and then finally it's over. And so that's just something that it's a safety measure, that horse will spin around, spin that head around anytime you want it. And so I wondered one day if I could teach Cash to do that at liberty with a treat. And it actually took no longer than 3 minutes.
Huh, wow. Dang.
And we teach concepts also. We teach concepts like other, because we always do that with the dogs, with Benji's original trainer, taught, say, give me your foot or show me your foot. And never saying shake hands, because that's just one thing. But you say, give me your foot, or put your foot, or the dog knows that's his foot. But the minute that he learns that, then Frank teaches, say, now give me your other foot, and teaches the dog the difference. So now, no matter which one the dog starts with, you say other foot, they go to the other one.
Oh, interesting.
So they understand that concept. And if you say, going over that chair, and they start for that chair, and you say, no, the other chair, and they'll turn around and look, and you point, and they'll say, oh, okay, got it, and go. And so I have applied that same thing to the horse, and I taught Cash to flex, and literally all I did was hold a treat back by his rib cage, and I said, come on, flex, here it is, see it, back, all the way, and he actually knew what flexing was, because he had learned it, with reins and whatnot, and so he knew the word. And so it took him literally just no time at all to make the connection. He went back and got the treat, and so then I backed off and said, okay, flex, and he would go back and say, no, touch. He would touch his rib cage, and he'd get a treat. And as soon as he had that, which was very quickly, then I said, now we're going to go to the other side, flex the other side, and I would hold the treat over from the side I was on, and make sure he knew about it. I said, go to the other side, and he would do that. And he had both sides down, and all I had to do was kind of flick my finger in the direction or something and say, flex. You'd boink, you'd do it. And most of the time, we'd go right back to the other one before I could ask him for it and go the other side.
Yeah, so, give me a treat.
Yeah, he said, and I mean, there were times when Cash would come up and do his whole routine, everything he knew.
That's funny.
And I said, no, we're done with that. No, I told you we're done. No, we're all right.
Funny.
He would always take it far enough to where he would get one, but he'd never be horsey about it. It was done. But that's, I leaped forward quite a bit there because trust. That's where trust took me, and I think that's the most important thing that anybody can do is get the trust of their horse at the horse's will, not at their will, before they do anything else, and that includes riding, training, or whatever, and then use positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement, and that rules out losing your temper.
Mm.
You cannot lose your temper, because the thing that I always say is, the last thing I want is for any horse to have buried in his brain something that is negative or caused a fear reaction from him. And the horse, being a horse is a flight animal, because in the wild he has no way to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, his fight is to run away. And so a horse is very, very fearful of anything that's new. In the wild, they're taught by the herd masters and all to always react first and think about it later, because that instant, that second or two that it takes, to actually think about it and say, is that really a thing, or is that a plastic bag blowing across the path?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or as Pat Pirelli calls it, what is a Bengal butterfly or something? Some butterfly flies across, and the horse says, "Oh my God!" And so the whole concept of them trusting you is a big help for that. But you've got to always know that all of the treatment, there's not a mean bone in any horse's body ever. It's just not there. They're not born that way. And if they show mean tendencies, it's because they were put there by some human somewhere. And I've seen over and over and over and over and over and over and over the evidence of that.
Yeah.
And it is and when that happens, then you've got to really be cautious and be careful, and take twice or 3 or 4 times the amount of time that you take with a clean Mustang, because it's going to take them a while to clean their plate and to get over all the things that humans have done to them that have made them afraid.
And people can see that, like, on YouTube and stuff. And I noticed that, like, at the rodeo, when I used to go to the Houston rodeo a long time ago, if I'd watch people in a little cart on their horse going through a little obstacle course, and if the person was uptight and jittery, the horse would be uptight, they wouldn't do so well, it wouldn't listen to him. But when the person was calm and didn't use their crop, then the horse set it down, they were sharp, the horse was calm as well. And right. It's like with some dogs too. It's like one thing people can notice, if you haven't already, is like there's usually a relationship between how a dog behaves and how a person behaves. And if someone's strong and confident and just a confident kind of like passive leader, as Mark Rashid calls it, like you're a leader, but you don't demand it. It just, the dog or cat will follow you like a horse will, because you show that you're good at what you do and you have their goodwill at heart. If you're like, it doesn't mean you're passive, but you get the leadership position like by them coming to you instead of like forcing it on them. But if you got like that passive leadership thing, then the dog or the cat is going to be that way too. Yeah.
But that one of the things is, and I'm going to differ with you a little bit.
Cool.
Because one of the things that I have found is that humans try to overcomplicate this thing. That passive leadership. What does that mean?
Exactly.
Oh my God, can I be leadership while being passive, or do I have to be active? What do I do? Trust.
It's our nature.
One word.
But then we could say, what does trust mean?
They have to do it. You have to figure out how to get them to do it or let them do it. You can't force them to do it. You
right.
You can't be the active party.
Yeah, that's the idea, right?
In the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it through, join up. You can do it through no agenda time. You can do it like I'm doing it with Zeke, which is, some combination of no agenda time and other stuff. But they have got, once they're there, once they trust you, then that's the difference that it makes, that in the relationship, and the relationship
mm-hmm.
actually comes after the trust.
Yeah, so some people talk about the same thing.
You got to have a good relationship with the horse, and a lot of the clinicians practice teaching that. The first thing you got to do is you got to have the horse's respect. That horse must respect you, because that's the only way you'll be safe from the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. That's dead wrong. That is absolutely dead wrong. Now, you've got to be careful, and you got to know what you're dealing with. Like with Zeke, I work totally differently with Zeke than I would with Safi, for example, because there's no way in the world that Safi is ever going to do anything but say, "I trust you. What do you want me to do?" And it's been there from the mark. But
mm-hmm.
that's where it starts, and that's where it's got to start. And when somebody says that horse has got to respect you, I want to know where they're getting respect without issuing a certain amount of dominance, and that's what you don't want to do. You don't want to be the dominant person in this relationship. And if you are dominating the horse, either physically or mentally, to get their respect, you're not getting their respect.
Yeah, that's
you're getting their submission, but
right.
You're not getting their respect.
Yeah.
You get their respect is an automatic offshoot of them trusting you. It happens automatically. Zeke will come anywhere in the pasture. I call him. He'll come most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
He's not really into a good patch, and if I get up there where he can see me, he'll come. And usually he comes at a run, which is not the most comfortable thing in the world, particularly when we get as much rain as we do here. But he does. I didn't teach him to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That came as a natural offshoot from the no agenda time, the trust, giving him no reason whatsoever to distrust, and not having an agenda. I mean, that a lady wrote me an email just 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago. I don't. It wasn't long ago, and said, "Can you give me any advice? I get my halter and I go out to the pasture and I can't catch my horse." And I wanted to scream as loud as I could. I found some way to say it nicely, but
of course,
leave your dang halter in the barn and go out and see your horse and see what happens.
Yeah, more people need to
do that. The horse sees you coming with something that immediately is going to mean some kind of work, some kind of negative reinforcement, and it's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and it is, and I guarantee, and I did, I finally, I talked to her about that, and I did get one later saying, "That's all I've been doing lately, and it's amazing. A horse doesn't run from me anymore."
It's funny. Yeah.
This is not rocket science, folks. It's really not. It is simply not rocket science. And the last thing I want to do is what Linda Pirelli did to Pat Pirelli. Pat Pirelli is a great horseman. Linda Pirelli tried to codify it all. Tried to take what Pat has done over the years and what has learned over the years, and how he's the one who coined the term, take as much time as it takes and it'll take less time.
Mm-hmm.
And take the time that it takes and it'll take less time. But she has gone way overboard and you can't codify an emotional event. It's like people who write scripts for movies. How to write a script for a movie. That's not something you can do. You can say how to format a script for a movie if you like, but you can't take something that somebody did from their heart and a story that they told that they were passionate about and break it down into little bitty pieces and say, if you do this on every script that you write, if you do this here on page 12, you do this and this, you'll have a good script. Wrong.
Yeah, you need principles
because it's coming from your intellect. You can't deal, with storytelling from your intellect. You can't do that, and that's why Stephen Covey's 7 things and somebody else's 10 things and somebody's 12 things are not the route to take. Because they're all intellectual exercises of taking something and say, oh, well, this person, to do what he did, he was persistent. And he was this, and he was that, and he was something else. If you're passionate about what you're doing, that means in your heart you feel that you really are doing the right thing and you want to do the right thing, you'll do all the other things.
Yeah, as long as you're a nice person. Yeah.
You will do the things that you need to do if you're passionate about it. I mean, I got passionate about it when Cash came up behind me and blew in my ear.
Yeah.
And I suddenly, whatever I was before that, I wasn't after that, because I knew what had to come first.
Mm-hmm.
That he had to come first, and he is. That was my cell phone.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
But he is. I mean, I love the horse. I loved the horse, and still do. But I was going to do everything in my power to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a year and a half to get there. And by the time I did, and it's a good time to drop back a little bit if we still have some time. Mm-hmm. The thing that we began to find out, as I started digging into it. Now, Cash came to us with shoes on his front feet, no shoes on his back feet. And at the second level down from this house I was telling you, it was up on top of the hill, is the driveway comes up and the garages are there, and that's where one of the stalls were, and then you step down another notch, and that's where another one was. These are outdoor stalls, not in a barn somewhere. They were half covered with a roof, and one wall facing the ocean was actually a wall. The rest of it was all just outside. But we had concrete everywhere, and people were beginning to tell me, I said, well, why? Wait. Tell me, why does he have shoes on his front feet and no shoes on his back feet? And I never got a decent answer to that question. I mean, I really didn't. And I said, we got concrete running all over the place. I said, well, your horse is on concrete and asphalt and stuff like that. The hooves are going to crack and fall apart, and you won't have a horse. I said, what? And so that drew me to the Mustangs out in the wild right now.
Yeah, right.
on lava rock.
Yeah, why don't they fall apart?
and they've got the healthiest bodies and the healthiest hooves anything I've ever seen. And and so I start saying that to some of these people. I said, well, what about it? Oh, well, you can't compare the domestic horse to the wild horse, because we have bred all the wild genetics out of the horse. Wait, what?
Prove it.
Then I went off to the AAAS, the whatever it is. The S is for science. And I joined that so that I could get into the archives. And I went into the archives looking for how long does it take on horses or any species to begin to change the base genetics. not color, not, whether you have blue eyes or brown eyes or any of that, but just the base genetics of the horse or of the person or whatever. And come to find out that 5,000 years is the minimum to even begin to change the base genetics of a horse. And you may as well calculate closer to 10,000 before you're making any dents in the genetics of the horse. And, the wild horse, a lot of people don't realize this, but the wild horse grew up in the Great Plains and the Great Basin, actually the Great Plains first, and then ultimately the Great Basin of the United States of America. This is where the horse evolved, and they got it all the way back to 55 million years. They have the archaeology to back up this stuff, and up to 1 million years ago, the horse was pretty much the way he is today, based on the the bones and the archaeology that they have found. They found in the permafrost, the Alaskan permafrost, they found several horses that still had enough DNA, and I getting beyond my expertise here, but they still had enough DNA so that they could run full DNA tests on these horses that were anywhere from 14,000 to 26,000 years old. And there was less than 0.2% difference between those horses and the horses in my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's I go back and throw that at those people, and they just walk away. No, it can't be. I mean, we've bred these horses for 200 years, and they bred the foot right off of them.
So do your research, people.
They got to have shoes. And so, and what really started me in that direction is I'm thinking that if, Cash's back feet are going to fall apart, maybe I better put shoes on the back feet because of all the concrete that he's on around our property. And of course, the end result of this was I called the vet and I said, "We're pulling the shoes." And he said, "Which one?" And I said, "All 6 of them." And he says, "Don't you think you ought to wait and take it one at a time?" And I said, "No." And I told him why. I went through the hoof is supposed to flex every time it hits the ground. They can't do that with a shoe on it. What that flexing does, in addition to cushion the entire leg and shoulder of the horse, it draws blood, sucks blood into the hoof capsule, which is a very complicated. I used to think it was just a big wad of fingernail. It's not. I mean, there are tons of capillaries and blood veins running through the hoof, and it's a shame that vets don't study the hoof in vet school for more than 6-8 hours.
Oh yeah, like doctors don't study nutrition very much, and then think they're experts.
Right, exact same thing, but every time it hits the ground, it sucks a bunch of blood into it, and every time it goes off the ground, it contracts and shoves that blood back up the leg, which takes a lot of load off of the heart. Those are long and skinny legs on a horse, and we got 4 of them, and the heart's got to do all the work. You take a horse that is barefoot and a horse that wears shoes and do a heart count, a pulse count, and the heart rate on the horse that is barefoot will be, on average, 10% lower than the horse that's wearing shoes.
Have you done that research or some
No, I didn't do it,
somewhere?
But I have read
people,
it, and
cool. Interesting.
So where did it start? I mean, where did they start putting shoes on the horse in the first place?
Yeah. What do you think?
And I did the research on that.
Cool.
And where it goes back to not specific to where, man and place, but back in the medieval days and times, when the kings decided they were going to move up to the top of the mountain to put their castle because it was more secure, it was easier to protect from the top of the castle, and so they went up there and put their little villages and whatnot up there, and all the peasants stayed down in the valley. And so when the horses went up there was no place for them. There were no pastures on top of the mountain. There were just brick streets. And so the horse would clump around on the bricks and then go into his stall, where he would swish around in his own poop and pee for all day sometimes, or however long he was in there every day. And the chemical damage to the hoof when he would go out and clump around on the concrete is what would break him down. And so they tried to figure out, so, well, what are we going to do? The horses down in the pasture are doing fine, down in the valley, as they always had. But so somebody decides we're going to come up with a piece of metal that'll hold the hoof together, basically, and it'll keep the hoof itself from clumping around on those brick papers down there. And that's basically what where it came from. And then they went down the hill to go off and fight a battle somewhere, and all the peasants down in the valley, whose horses were doing just fine barefoot, said, "Oh my God, he's got all this shiny metal on their shoes, on their feet. We better do that."
Cool.
Too.
Let's do it.
The king knows best, right?
Yeah.
And the ammonia that they would suffer in stalls that weren't cleaned out to a smidgen every day, would just tear them up. So that's where the whole thing started. And
Interesting.
The nothing. There was no breeding the wild hoof off of the horse. It was all about the horse living like he's supposed to live. And so then that took me, even from the course of our horses, when the shoes came off of Cash, I don't think I've ever seen a horse smile before or after like he did.
Cool.
I mean, he was one happy camper, and he was good to go. Oftentimes, because the hoof has had so little blood flow for so long that it takes months sometimes, and it takes somewhere in the vicinity of 8 to 12 months, depending on the horse and so forth, for them to grow a new hoof all the way from the top to the bottom. And sometimes that's what they have to do. They have to grow a whole new hoof before they're really good. But you got to let them do it.
Yeah.
And you can't say, "Oh no! Well, every time a shoe falls off of my horse's hoof, he's hurt. He's got to have the shoe." And I said, "Have you ever crossed your legs for so long that when you uncrossed them and tried to stand up, you couldn't?" That's exactly what's happening to the horse. When the blood flow goes away, the nerve endings go away also. And so it doesn't feel anything when that shoe is on the hoof. You pull the shoe off, and suddenly the blood's flowing again, and he's saying, "Oh my God, what's that? That hurts," because it's been so damaged. And that's I mean, it's like so many other things that we have done.
Yeah.
Everything in the world by not really knowing what we were talking about when we start.
Yeah.
And here is an animal who is born, a flight animal. Fear is his number one thing, and actually their safety is the number one thing that they worry about all the time. And the second most is procreation, so they can
Mm-hmm.
build a species. And they, are, like I say, a flight animal, and they live in a herd for one reason, not because they're all buddy and friends, having fraternity meetings or anything. No, it is safety in numbers. And so when they're away from the herd, that's the worst time for them that they can be.
And one thing, before we get into the herd thing a little bit more, like people can look up if they want more evidence about the barefoot thing. Look up Houston Mounted Patrol.
Yeah,
absolutely. They go barefoot. All their horses, they used to be shod, but they'd have some hoof problems and other problems. But once they went barefoot, pretty much all that stuff went away. People might
they cut their vet bills over one half.
Wow, because it was mostly
over a half for all. I think what is it?
Wow, I didn't know that.
I think there's 40 horses involved, 35 to 40
right.
in that range, and they literally cut their vet bills in half, and now they're going bitless also.
Oh wow, sweet! I didn't know that. That's awesome.
And you don't need a bit. And finally, I've seen a lot of people who told me I was nuts, or who are actually doing it now and still eventing, doing jumps and whatever, and barrel racing and all that kind of stuff. Because there's several people out there now. Stacy Westfall is one of them.
Yeah.
Who rides and wins standard Western competitions with no bit, no bridle, no saddle.
And I'll put some links to some of that in the show notes for folks to see, like Stacy and her horse working.
Yeah, she is. That's. I've always said that's who I want to be when I come back. But she's really, really, really good at that, and there are a lot more people doing that now. This Mustang Maddie I was talking about,
cool.
Won her latest Mustang. These Mustang competitions that they have around the country in order to try to stimulate adoptions and so forth. And the horses sell after the show to whoever wants to buy them, and oftentimes the trainer buys them and takes them home because they've gotten attached to them. But she does that. She won her last, I think it was her last one,
cool.
With no saddle and no bridle. All messages from the horse, from the person to the horse were, through the body, and she won it.
Wow, it's awesome.
So anyway, so we began, a horse in a stall. I found this somewhere. Somebody had done a test to see how many steps a horse in a stall takes in the course of a 24-hour day.
Mm.
And on average, it's 800. A horse in the wild will move anywhere from 10 to 20 miles a day. Their entire body is designed for movement. They munch and move all day long and all night long. They sleep maybe 3 hours out of a 24-hour period. And every once in a while, they've got to have REM sleep. To get REM sleep, they got to lay down on their side. They look dead. They're just flat on the side. But that's the only way they can get REM sleep. And if you watch them, it's really fascinating because they dream. Mm-hmm. You can see them running in a dream.
Oh.
Their feet are actually moving like they were running.
Cool.
And whatnot. And it's usually no more than 15 or 20 minutes. But they've got to have at least one other horse from the herd standing guard before they'll do that. Mm-hmm. Which, A, doesn't happen when they're in a stall,
Mm-hmm.
B doesn't happen when they're the only horse on the property,
Mm-hmm.
and so they don't, because that's the most vulnerable position they can be in, is lying down flat out, totally asleep. Because the sleep that they get standing up is, they never get into REM sleep. They need a certain amount of REM sleep to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, you can't take a horse that is meant to be in the wide open spaces where he can see the horizons to know if there are any predators coming, where he can live with other horses, and where he's going to be eating and moving constantly. And proof that this is part of the genetic situation is, our digestive acid comes and goes with the presence of food.
Mm-hmm.
Turns on and turns off. Theirs doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Theirs is running constantly, 24 hours a day. Which means they're expecting to have some of those munchies come in constantly, 24 hours a day. And,
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever... I was told that if you let your horse eat grass on the side of a trail, you are losing control. The horse is testing you. That's all he's doing.
That's ridiculous. You're like showing you're a good leader and taking it to where there's grass. It's like,
that's exactly
it's
the
trust.
point.
It's having fun.
It's
part of the no agenda thing.
Is, how can I figure it out so that the horse thinks I'm the one that's taking him to the grass rather than him going to the grass?
Yeah, or that'd be like someone taking you to like a Brazilian steakhouse and not letting you eat. It's like, what the hell is that?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you know the Brazilian steakhouses, Joe?
No.
Yeah, we got them maybe, I don't know how much around the country they are. We got them more down here, but it's a restaurant you go into, sit down at a table, and they bring meat to you. You got a card that's red and green. If you turn it on the red side, they know you're not interested. If it's on the green side, then they bring you meat, and it's on these spits, and you get chicken, pork, beef, lamb, and they just bring you all these meat and all these different cuts. It is so good. It's the best.
Oh, man. Well, I promised Kathleen to get her to marry me that I would make it to 102 dancing.
Cool.
And so my diet isn't that. I am working hard on making sure that I am eating as well as I can for the work that the body's got to do.
Yeah.
But anyway, what we wound up
horse
doing,
digestive system in the grass and all that. Yeah.
in California, we wound up building in about a 1.5 acre space, what is called a paddock paradise, or a tracking system.
Called a what?
Where a tracking system.
But what was the other term
track.
you used?
Huh?
Paradise or something?
Yeah, the paddock paradise kind of concept.
What is that?
It's what we did in California, and I was going to tell you, there is a video on our website called Our Paddock Paradise, and it shows how we service it and what they do. And we had an outside perimeter that covered approximately 1.5 acres. We had an inside perimeter, and this is all done with electric fence, that eliminated some really bad places, boulders, drop-offs and things, and kept them from cheating by going across. That's what we wanted to do, was go around. And when they're going around, they're going up and down, too, because you look at that hill on the photographs and on the website, and it's amazing. It is, because it is literally straight up and down. And so we were putting out approximately 100 little piles of hay all the way around that circle. 3 different kinds, so that they'd have choices. And they would go around once to get their favorite, They go back around and clean up the favorite. Then they go and munch on the next to favorite and clean that up and go for the last one. And somewhere around there, they would go in, come to the top of the hill and take their noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon nap, and then go back around and clean up everything that hadn't been cleaned up already. By that time, it's time to feed again. And anytime there was hay left over, we'd cut back, and anytime there was no hay left over, we'd add, so that they had 100% of the 24-hour period or the 12-hour period between feeds. They had free choice hay available to them because there was no such thing as grass where we were.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, it's kind of a high desert location, and that is, and we'd put it out with the gator. We'd take these 4-wheel drive farm gator things, pile the hay in the back of it, and go all the way around, putting it out, and then they'd go all the way around, and we clocked it one time. I figured out what the distance was to take the whole circle, and it wasn't like 10 feet wide or something. It was spaciously wide, somewhere down to 15 or 20 feet in some places, depending upon what the terrain was like and so forth. And so it wasn't like being on a merry-go-round or anything, but the water was at the top of the hill, so that they would always have to get back to the top of the hill to drink water. And we clocked them one 24-hour period and surmised that they were approximately getting somewhere between 8 and 12 miles a day of movement.
Cool.
And that was on an acre and a half. I mean, the whole thing was 2.5 acres, but the outer perimeter of this track was approximately an acre and a half. Yeah, I never measured it for sure, but they were getting lots of movement. They were getting hay 24 hours a day, and they were happy campers. When we first took the first one over there, he was Mr. Lazy and Mr. Slow. His stop was his best speed, his favorite speed, and he went berserk when we dropped the halter off of him. He just went crazy. He was running all over the place, up and down the hills, doing it for about 10 or 15 minutes. Finally wandered back over to us and, his own way said, "Thanks, Bo."
Nice.
This is cool. But and so they all wound up going over there. And so they were all over there. And any time we got rain, which is pretty rare, that part of California, if it was a bad rain, then we'd pull them off the hill and put them back over in the stall areas just for the short period of time until it could dry out a little bit, because I was always worried. It was so steep that I wasn't worried about a single horse finding his footing.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when there's a bunch of them together and they're all eating and whatnot, one will, it's like musical hay piles. It's because the grass is always greener.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're over that horse, you move that horse out, then that horse moves out, and then that horse winds up going all the way to the back and starting over and whatnot. But I've seen it often happen where it gets pretty boisterous.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Get on out of here!" Look, nip it, and the horse runs, and I just didn't want something accidental to happen to him. Because it was, like I say, it was straight up and down, and it was very slippery when it was a clay-like kind of soil. And anyway, they were all good over there, and still over here, and we do similar things over here. We just don't fence it because we don't have to, but we use hay because their movement is dependent upon the hay, not dependent upon making the track, making the fencing, all of that. It's their. Anytime you've got two or more, and you put out a string of hay piles, you're going to get the benefit of that because there's always going to be one moving the other one out. Mm-hmm. Because if that one's liking what's up there, it must be better, right? So, so I'm going to go get that one. Oh no, now he's eating that one up there.
That's funny.
So
yeah, so just like in the movies, when you're doing the Benji stuff, some pretty good problem solving you got going here.
Well, it's I told you the math story, and and I think that's true because that's basically what it all comes down to. And if you're passionate about what you're doing, it always the obstacles are not the same obstacles as when you're just doing a job that you don't care anything about.
Yeah, true.
When you're passionate about it, you're going to find a way over that obstacle or under it or around the side of it or how to explode it out of your way completely. And
or 5 different ways.
Yeah, you are going to find a way to get her done, so to speak. And there was no way that I wouldn't. And then when I got onto this and really started digging deeply into it, it kind of scoops you up, so to speak. You're in it now. I got 7 horses down there that are totally at liberty 24 hours a day. And the only time a halter ever gets put on anybody is if there's some reason for the vet. And Safi has a thyroid problem. She's the Mustang that was talked about, and so she gets thyroid medication because she has a low thyroid, and we track it about every 6 weeks with a blood test, and when the vet comes out to draw the blood, I just stand next to her on the other side with my arm around her head. We don't put a halter on her or anything.
Cool, nice.
She doesn't even flinch. I don't know how she does it. I couldn't. I mean, I flinch when I go get a blood test. But
yeah.
Anyway, that's the learning curve that we went through doing all of this. I think is pretty important. That's pretty much what Soul of a Horse does. But Soul of a Horse is written kind of as a story, not as a preaching. I've been preaching a lot here today.
Cool.
Of why things are wrong, what needs to be done about them, and so forth. But it was the Soul of a Horse is kind of this wonderment that how can this be? How can all this be true? And all these people don't know it, or they don't respond to it, or they don't understand it, and they say they love their horses. Mm-hmm. I have asked numerous people over the years, what is the first thing you should do when you get new horses or a new horse? Mm-hmm. Before you get the horse. And I have never had anybody say knowledge, get knowledge to me.
Yeah.
Ever. And I wouldn't have said it either, probably back then, because, we started out with all of ours installs, eating mush sugar from a bag. Sugar is the worst thing a horse can have. Mm-hmm. And being locked up and wearing shoes, the whole enchilada. But once we got a hold of it, we went from zero to 100 pretty quick.
Yeah, it's good. It's good that you were looking into it and researching and caring like that, wanting to do the best for your horses.